In this video, Process takes you behind the scenes and into the creative mind of artist and musician Stanley Lake, co-founder in 1988 of Quebec's Tour des Arts. This presentation will demonstrate Stanley's mask-making techniques. And now, Stanley Lake, the Family Portrait Series.
In this presentation of the Family Portrait Series, Mask Making, I will be presenting to you some photographs and give you a brief description of what's going on in the process, and midway through show you a video of my giving the mask life by working from underneath and giving it more dimensionality, and follow up with a few more photos of the decorative process that I go through, and then some photos of the series in itself, of some pieces that I've done in the series, remembering that everything I'm showing to you now has not been fired. Firings will start in end of April and should be ready by the end of May. I thought it might be interesting for you to see two photos of how or what influenced the Family Portrait Series. I did last 2020 in the later spring, after COVID had got a hold of the community and people were starting to overeat, including myself. These photos were part of that series, the Overeating COVID Family Portrait Series, and so here are two examples of that. So I start with a slab of clay that I've run through my slab maker, and then with a rolling pin just even it out a bit and measure it and cut it to shape. And then I do a rough mock-up on the slab of clay, just positioning where I might put the eyes and nose and mouth and the chin, and it just gives me an idea of where I'm placing things. In this photo, I'm identifying where the eye sockets are and pushing down to give some depth to the eye socket, and the clay is moist, so I can move it around in that sense. And in this one, you'll see I'm giving it a little more depth and a little more placing of where I want the eye sockets to be. Here I've taken a couple wads of clay. I slip and score both surfaces where they're going to be attached. The scoring obviously helps one clay piece adhere to another clay piece, and then I will attach these together with a bit of pressure. So I've put in the wads of clay for the eyelid socket, and I get underneath them a bit and give them a bit of shape. In these photos you can see that I'm using both a tool and I'll use my finger to create a definite shape for the eyelid. And eventually later on I'll put in the eyeball. So for the nose, I've scored the surface and put some slip down and rolled a coil of clay and put it on that area where I want the nose to go. And I'm always working the clay from one piece down to another piece so that I get a good attachment. So when I'm putting clay on top of another piece, I always try to move clay from the top piece down to the bottom, or the bottom up to the top, and then I'll smooth it out. So in creating the mouth, I'll put down an oval slab of clay. Well, I slip and then I score both surfaces. Then I'll attach the pieces together and push down on them. Here I'm doing a rough placement of the mouth, just with a line, and creating the bottom lip and the top lip and giving some definition. And I'll certainly go back and work this. So in the next three photos, you'll see a difference in the structure of how I do the mouth. In the first photo, where it's quite open, I have to accommodate a copper pipe that's going to go through there, that's going to direct the water into the basin. So that has to be kept quite open. The expression can be limited that way because you have a pipe going through the mouth. And I just am going to show you what I do when the lips are a little closer together in the next two photos. I can get a lot more expression out of those. In the next two photos, I'll show you how I create a chin, but first I have to take a slab of clay and I score the areas, slip and score the areas, and then I can put the two pieces of clay together and I'll work those in. You'll see in the next photo how I've given some structure to that clay. I've worked it into the slab of clay that's underneath it, so I'm creating a little more dimension there. Now in these photos I'm going back to work the nose. I put some slip there and I attach more clay to that, and then I'll start working that in and creating a little more dimension with the nose. You'll see that in the three photos that we're presenting here. So in this photo you'll see that I've sprayed the clay. I want to keep that clay somewhat moist and plastic. Don't want it to dry out, because in the video that's going to follow these photos you'll see that I'm going underneath and I'm pushing out the clay, so I want it to be able to move and accommodate that push from the inside. So in these photos I've added little balls of clay for the eyes. I'll put the eye ball, the marking of the eye, later on, the pupil. But so I've just put the eyeball in here, and I'm reworking the nose a bit too. So in this photo I now have the structure, the basic structure of where I want the eyes, nose, and mouth, and now I'm starting to redefine where the actual shape, or how the actual shape of the head will be. Again, when I go, you'll see in the video, when I start pushing out from underneath, it's going to change the structure, and I'll probably be changing these lines too. But this gives an idea of where I might want to go with that. In these next two photos, right before I go to the video showing you how I get underneath the head and the slab of clay itself and push things out, I've started to define where the shoulders would be, and that'll indicate where I start to push things out. And I'll be decorating this surface later on, but I first have to add the dimensionality that I want in the form. So what I have done here, we're gonna switch. You've been seeing photos, and we're gonna switch to some videos of how I do the next step. This is for me the very exciting part of making this mask as part of the family portrait series. It's the process here of what I feel really giving life and dimensionality to the form. So you'll see here I've done a little more outlining of where I think certain parts of this figure can go. This is going to change as I get underneath the form and push out. So a lot of stuff that I've set up here will kind of shift in its presentation to the viewer. So I'll just start. So now I have a piece of paper underneath this slab. I'm going to have to peel that back a bit as I get underneath the clay. I don't want the paper there, so I'm getting underneath, and I'll start working with the cheeks. That's my first point of working here. Then I'll work in this area, then I'll work here. So just to get underneath, I can still slide this, and you want to counterbalance the form so it doesn't fall off. I peel the paper off a bit, but I keep it in place. Lift up the clay, and now I start with my fingers doing that activity. So I'm good. So you can already see a change in kind of the life of the figure here. So the clay is about ½ an inch thick, and it's somewhat moist, obviously, so that I can do this. So it's moist, it's plastic. I can move this clay around from underneath. And so that's one cheek. Push that back onto the form. Push this area down. I'll go back over and really compress my edges so that I don't set up any cracking. So here I'll do the same thing on this. Make sure that's supported, the board. Pull the paper back. Bring the form out a bit, pull the paper back a little more, and I get my fingers underneath there and start to push out. Okay, so I'm pushing out. Using my middle finger, maybe my index finger is combined with my middle finger to give a little more strength to what I'm doing. Coming down to the chin. And there's so many ways you can push out a certain area and not another area. You can leave this area lower, you can leave this area lower, or you can support it and push it out, and that'll have a different effect on the image that you're eventually going to be presenting to the world, to the public. So here you start to see a little bit more form. So obviously I have to make this a little more symmetrical. So I look at this way and I see this is out more. That needs to come out a little bit more for some symmetry. There's not always, if you look at the human face, perfect symmetry. You'll see noses that are, nostrils are not totally 100% identical. So you can have these masks be, whatever, you're in charge. They can be caricatures or they can be totally lifelike. Mine are more caricatures and nuances, representing nuances of the human form. So there we get that a little bit better. I push this down again and I will compress that edge. Now I'm going to go into the forehead area, bring this form over, peel the paper back, and do the same thing with the forehead area. Working this area so that what I did below kind of flows into my forehead area. We'll bring that there. And I like to accent this ridge that we have on our faces. Bring that out perhaps a little bit more and then have it flowing down to the forehead. I'll try to push that out. Again, working the flow from the first cheek push out to the forehead push out. And push this down a bit. You can already see that I need a little bit more here. Get a little bit more balance. Now if the clay was a little bit softer, I have these wads of newspaper that I've made that will support. But this is holding up pretty decently. But you'll see the change that happens right here. I'm going to put this piece of paper underneath. I think I'll do it from the forehead area. So I'll bring this down a bit. Lift this up. Get that paper to separate. Put that in. It's probably ending right around there. Push that back. I can bring this down a bit. Compress the edges. Especially when you're manipulating your clay a lot, you want to compress again to avoid any cracks. Let's see what that did. So I'll bring down these edges too. So I think I wanted a little bit more rise in that area. So by doing this, you completely and obviously change from that flat dimension, the one-dimensional, to the more three-dimensional aspect of this form. You're creating that by pushing out more. So we get that. I think I want a little bit more here. These lines that I've set up, I can, change, obviously, and just see my pushing out will have affected the form a bit. So get that there. That's not too bad. I think I want a little bit more here. Make sure it's balanced here so it doesn't fall off onto the ground. And we'll push out. There. You can see how that changes the whole intent of the piece. So push out this side too. There's a lot of fiddling on this to try to get what's going on one side and the other side there. I like that. I like this area. I'm going to push it out even more. Accents this, the chin. So we do that. I must have dropped one of these at one point, so I'm very aware of just keeping that space, the board, on the table so it doesn't flip. These are the jowls that I love to make, this area here. You see this on people that have eaten really well. They have a lot of flesh hanging over here. Very interesting dynamic of the face. So these overeaters provide us with some really nice forms on the human face, I find that, a person, how one person has lived their life a bit really shows up in the face, especially with the wrinkles or crinkles. I was talking about this in another video I made about how laughing people have all these lines around the eyes. You should look in the mirror and see where your wrinkles are, how they come about. If you smile a lot, there's certainly other wrinkles than if you don't smile a lot. I'm going to push out this area a little bit more. And if you frown a lot, there's certain lines that take here, or if you're a frowner, your sides of the lips come down. If you're a smiler, they go up. If you've been staring at the sun a lot, or crinkling your face up, certain furrows up here in your eyebrows. So I think life experiences and who you are, basic personality, will determine the roadmap of your face. If you look at people's faces closely enough, you can perhaps intuit who they are. It's a generalization, but perhaps. I've also noticed that this is a great generalization, that, but I've noticed it, that the lines here, I think I showed this in my other photo before I started doing the video here. Oftentimes, when a thin upper lip, most politicians have a thin upper lip. Now, why? Maybe it's because that thin upper lips causes a greater closing of the bottom lip and the top lip, so the lies are more easily, they flow more easily. That's a great generalization and a very disparaging remark, but it's an observation. So here we have this area. I don't think I need any support underneath. Oftentimes I'll put something there to support that forehead, but this is holding up okay. Now I'm going to start working with this. So you see I've already kind of delineated some parts of the body, the shoulders, and I'm going to go in and accent a few of these areas. So make sure that paper is, it's hard to push the clay with the paper still attached to it. So I'm peeling the clay away, and I'm going to give some structure now to the shoulders. Creating the chest here, and for me this is a female figure, so I'm going to work on this area, and fun to do. Just pushing from the inside. And you'll see some little splitting of the clay. The clay is not, it's a little more dry than I like it to be, but I'm going to be putting a white slip on this clay surface, so it doesn't really matter that it's kind of cracking. Oftentimes I'll leave that. You'll see that here. I'll leave that. I like the characteristics that it indicates some sun exposure, cracking of the skin. It just adds character. So here we go. We're getting a little more dimension here. Pushing from underneath. There we go, and I'll compress this again. These are the straps, wearing a t-shirt, the shoulders here, and I'm going to decorate this top area with hair. I'm going to do, I think I mentioned in another video that I did that I like to do the eyeballs, the almost one of the last things. It shows the intent of the directionality of where that person is looking, or where you might be looking with this person. Just accent these a little bit more. I'll rework this a bit more, and I'll accent it with some lines on top and bottom. But now I can get this cavity, it's almost like creating a shadow here, this darkness in this area, by pushing it down more, a little bit more. Do this here. So here we have some white porcelain slip, and I'll use this as like a paint for my decorative purposes. And you have to know that they're two different clays, and they have different shrinkage rates, and you have to know that they are compatible with each other. So, and I do know that because I've experimented a lot. And I know that they do work together, which is great. So I can apply this to parts of this clay that I want. You can see I'm using a very high-end, sophisticated brush. That's a joke. This is better. So, there we go. It's a very easy way to decorate. As opposed to using a glaze, like a white glaze, and applying it, and getting the right thickness. So this could be either, there are formulas for white slips, or you could try using a white clay, like a white stoneware with a brown stoneware, regular stoneware, and just see if they're compatible. And if they are, then it opens up a lot of doorways for decoration. I will decorate my pieces very simply with just red iron oxide powder that's mixed in water to a certain consistency. You'd have to experiment with that because I do it just by eye. And that allows a nice contrast between, well, it darkens up the white, gives it kind of a rust color, and still some white will come through. There's a brush that I didn't clean that well, but I'll work it over. So now I'm going to also decorate the blouse that's being worn by this beautiful figure. This is fun. You can do so many things with the design of a piece at this point. I'll be using a lot of these stamps that will give decoration into this area, and also I'll decorate differently this area from this area. A bit of a contrast, and you'll have a contrast between the tone of the body. So this is, I've never had this happen, but you are moistening up the clay and it could collapse on you, but that's rare. Clay would have to be pretty soft to start with. It's fun, nice. And this is already starting to dry a bit, and I will do a second application to get a nice white there. So, go back a bit. I seem to be drifting over here. Put another layer on. Doing the corners. go. And I always used to say, well, let's do this a little bit before I tell you what I always used to say. So I always used to tell my students that if you have a line, bring it out, accent it, make it clean, make it clear. If you don't want a line there, then get rid of it. So now I'm going back in, cleaning up these lines, letting the viewer know that, oh yeah, I really do want that line there. So just going back in. Doesn't have to be precise, because when I put over that red iron oxide wash, it's going to take away little dots like that. But you can clean those up if you want. There we go. Now also going here. This area I'm going to be putting hair. I don't have to worry about it too much. This is a great tool I bought from a store with cooking supplies, or you can find these anywhere probably. It was a set of these different tools here, and it's become one of my just this year one of my favorite tools, especially this part here. It gives me a nice line. Okay, clean this up. So there you go with that. I think I'll stop the videos here and go back to photographs. You can, if you want to, get rid of some of the bumps. Sometimes I like the bumps. The non-smoothness of the slip. It depends on what you're looking for. In some figures that I make, I have it really bumpy, and it just gives a nice texture for the face here. And also, I think I'm going to do the eyes right now. Let's come under there a bit. So I kind of want to get up and see, if you were looking at this straight on, where do you want the focus of the eye. So I'm going to do a little, it's not going to be down gazing, but maybe a little more straight at you. And I like them inset a bit, I have a penchant to make things cross-eyed a bit. Some affinity towards that, I guess. Might be in your way there. That's pretty neat. she's looking. I'll rework these a little later, and I also like to accent this ridge with a line. And it brings it out. I like to accent this line. I mean, most people have this line here. By doing that, I also accent this dimensionality here. I might actually go in and from underneath and push that out a little bit more. Really start to take on a little more life here. Also this wonderful area here. And I am going to go back in and push that out a little bit more. See what happens. Just be careful not to go through. Again, compress this. Now this is going to be a, yeah, I like that. This is going to be a mask for a wall fountain. I'll show you the wall fountain. It won't have this mask. This is a new series that I'm doing for these wall fountains. Typically have a different representation going on. Yeah, I feel I have to go back in here a little bit more. Bring this out just a bit. Alright, kind of like that. Push these down a bit. And let's work on these where I had my fingers. Just to give you an idea, I'll be decorating with these little stamps, and I'll do a repetitive pattern. But I'm not going to bore you with going over the whole thing. I'll show you the end result of that, and then I'll show you a photo of my putting hair up here, maybe some braids, and see what other decorations happen. I'll show you those in some photos. And I'll also show you some finished wall fountains, and you'll see how different these masks for this spring are, quite different from what I've done in the past. But this is from my family portrait series, the whole evolution of how I started with the COVID overeaters series. These. Anyway, I'll explain that a little later. Okay, thanks for watching, and we'll continue with some photos and finish up the piece. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and I think at the end of it I showed you the tool that I used to decorate the surface. In these next photos, you'll see that in the background around the head. Also another tool I used to decorate the t-shirt that the figure is wearing. Again, I need the clay not to be too moist at this point, otherwise the tools will stick to that. So there you see the stars all around the figure, the designs on the t-shirt. So the last step is to put some hair on this figure. So I slip the surface. I don't usually score it, but you can for sure. I'll slip the surface and prepare the hair that's going on it. And here you'll see a photo of the Shimpo hand extruder that I use to make small coils, or in this case, the hair. So I'll put in a somewhat moist piece of clay, and if it's not moist enough, I will shoot some spray some water into the chamber of the extruder, and that keeps things moist as I push it forward. And you'll see the hair that's come out of that extruder. And here I've taken that extruded clay, kind of spaghetti looking, and I've placed it on the head on top of the slip. And here I will pat it down and also go in with my tool and bring a little bit of clay from the hair down onto the face, and just to make a little bit more secure attachment. So this series, the family portrait series, I'm using a few of these that I'm making for masks that will go on my wall fountains. This is a photo of my wall fountain, a very different style of mask that I use for those. And I'd have to say that this new wall mask that I just made for you to see is a great departure, and I'll be curious to see how my customers react to it. It should be fun. So thanks for watching, and I certainly invite you to go visit my webpage, which I hope to be updating soon. But I've been saying that for about 7 years. But I plan to do that this year, and take a look at other products that I make besides these family portrait series. And I am going to close this presentation with a few more photos from my family portrait series. I hope you enjoy them.
So we hope you enjoyed this presentation of Process, and please feel free to hit the like button. Please check out the links below for other videos created by the team at Cooking Mind Productions, Quebec. Thank you.